Today, I want to kind of discuss and give my commentary on the state of affairs with the D2 community amidst the recent layoffs and the state of the game, in which I will mostly give my outlook on PvP and what the aforementioned doom and gloom and layoffs mean for the Crucible as a whole. In short, it's cooked. Let's be honest. But jokes aside, I also want to explore the conundrum of Bungie and why or how they handle the Crucible because they have the right ideas but lack a cohesive vision for what they believe the Crucible should be. I will start by doing some introspection and realizing that I was wrong to assume that all the issues causing Destiny to have unenjoyable periods of the gameplay experience were because of the developers. There were passionate folks at the studio who poured their blood, sweat, and tears into creating the game we all know and love, while also having the interest of the player in mind. But unfortunately, things were not looking so bright at the top end of management. Not that it means much coming from the likes of me, but I really am sorry for the insensitive comments and judgments made from a place of frustration and ignorance all that time ago. With that being said, I know the D2 community is in a very strange place these days coming off of the hype of the conclusion of the Light and Darkness saga. Players saw through to the end, and then many lost interest in the game, and I imagine the episodic model isn't honestly going to keep players intrigued, both content and lore-wise. It really is just a rebrand of the seasonal model, if I'm being honest. A lot of creators are sort of stepping back from the Destiny space, and for obvious reasons. Most creators have hit a creative dead end, and if you are a content creator, you are doing this because it pays bills. Kinda hard to pay the bills if your content isn't really getting pushed by the algorithm, and that could be for a multitude of factors. My point, though, is that Destiny 2 as a game is solved, and creators have milked as much as they could from the new exotic missions to the new weapons. Game knowledge of the average player has went up significantly, so the folks who would have felt the need to watch a weapon review in the past don't need a creator to tell them how good or bad a weapon is now. This is not to mention that a lot of it is clickbait, so because one person watches a video and is fooled by clickbait, they may feel that creators aren't trustworthy regarding weapon reviews, so they may not consume that style of content at all. To top it all off, the performance of videos from a creator is also heavily predicated upon the interest of the player base or the game at any given moment. An example would be Crucible style content. There is minimal to zero interest in the Crucible these days, and it has been that way for a long time, so PvP creators are essentially fighting for scraps, and the only content with the highest chance of giving a desirable result is Trials, and Trials videos are all honestly the same. All this to say, it makes a lot of sense why D2 creators are getting their feet wet and testing the waters with a different variety or style of content. An example of this would be, off the top of my head, Sir Demetrius. If you look at his variety of content, it does well because he's got that entertainment factor and personality that folks gravitate towards, and his editing style brings all of that together and makes for very entertaining videos. The same can't really be said for a majority of Destiny Crucible creators, so it's no wonder everyone is on edge these days. We are currently in the cycle of players, myself included, kinda just complaining about the core plays of the game again and the relative balance. And the unfortunate reality about experiencing greatness is that you can only experience that one particular thing once, and afterwards, you're either left chasing that dragon or going back to what you do, where you have a somewhat decent time. With the final shape, I had a great time doing the story and experiencing the closure of the Light and Darkness saga. I had a great time experiencing the Salvation's Edge contest raid for the first time, and I had a great time with the Dual Destiny and that questline associated with that. All this to say, one could then ask me what the issue could be. The issue is that you can only experience those things once. After all is said and done, I'm playing Crucible, which isn't in a good state either. I guess that segments conveniently into my outlook on Crucible and what the recent circumstances at Bungie mean for Crucible. In short, like I said at the beginning, the game's cooked and can really only get worse, and it's safe to set your expectations in the ground. First of all, this ability sandbox is so unenjoyable to the point where I only play hardware, because I can at least play the first-person shooter aspect of Destiny 2. If the abilities are going to be like this, then the 30% cooldown penalty from OG Checkmate needs to take effect instead of the 15% penalty. And now that I think about it, what in the world happened to Checkmate? Everything, including the special meter, has pretty much been walked back, and the state of the game is not much different from when I stopped playing a couple years ago. Same TTKs, we're back to the ability spam and special ammo spam with no real way to showcase skill expression. This was one of the main factors that put me away from the game. And what made me come back initially was the idea of Checkmate. What makes this upsetting is that Checkmate's foundation was very solid, and Bungie stated their commitment to iteration on this. They iterated maybe several times on this, and then scrapped it because they bent their backs to the community's outcry for objectively bad changes, which makes me question if they even have the guts to stand behind any kind of vision or identity for Crucible in their minds. Ever since the beginning of Destiny 2, Bungie has showcased a lot of ideas or foundations that were very solid in theory, but executed poorly and received poorly from the community. Since Destiny is a live service after all, if a change is made and the community isn't receptive to it, seldom does Bungie continue to iterate on said change and instead scraps it completely because they must concede to the community of players that make them money. Bungie is trying to please everyone, and in the process, they please no one. Instead of trying to make everyone happy, I think a better solution would be to create pockets of the Crucible where players can decide to play and be happy. An example of this for me was hardware. I don't mind waiting an extra minute or two if it means I will generally have an enjoyable experience regardless of whether or not I win or what the outcome is. For someone else, they may be the exact opposite of me and love the power fantasy of abilities and supers, so they prefer to play Mayhem. I guess my point is that a player's enjoyment in Crucible is predicated upon the RNG rotation of game modes or playlists for that week. Since I don't really like the sandbox, most of the game modes are unplayable to me, unless it's hardware. I know other high-skilled players who just want to have a relaxed time in Crucible, and they don't really enjoy outlier protection because their stats are so high that they're in the top fraction of a percent of players. At that point, it might as well just be strict SBMM because those players couldn't match anyone else. So when the other playlists are either Mayhem or some variant of that, they don't really have a space in PvP to engage with outside of Trials. And don't even talk about competitive, it doesn't count. It's unplayably bad. After reading their blog post on the 25th of July, I don't think it's fair to say that there is a blatant disconnect between the developers and the players, because they seem to be attacking some of the pain points as stated here with the map weighting, the lobby balancing, and sandbox. However, I think this is too little too late because Bungie takes way too long to adjust things in the Crucible space. So when players are keeping that in mind, they're not really engaging with the Crucible space. They mentioned quitting, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably one of those habitual quitters. The reason people are quitting is because of how awful the team balancing and map rotations are, which they kind of addressed. Whether the lobby is lopsided in my favor or not, the outcome is the same. The game ends too early because one team cannot compete, or the outlier on the losing team quits because they know it's a foregone conclusion, which is most of my stories when I quit. With how the team balancing has been, the game puts so much of the weight on my shoulders to be the hero that I can with 95% accuracy guess the outcome of the match based on what weapons my teammates are using and how they move around the map, even to what their Bungie names or aliases are. If I see players on the other team with one-syllable names and one-syllable clan tags with these sweaty Bungie store emblems, I know I'm in for the match of my life. Meanwhile, I've got some Tower Blueberry with a zip code in his name. Like, I just know the outcome just off of the player names. And Bungie even acknowledges the fact that when a player leaves, their team is at a significant disadvantage because the lobby is balanced around their presence. This is certainly true considering that every game I leave, my team gets dumpstered. The biggest contributor to me leaving, though, is when the game loads me on a map that I hate, and the other is when I know I have no chance at contending with the enemy team because I'm balanced so hard, or when everyone quits, so I just requeue. Let's talk about the maps, though, because that plays a big factor into a player's enjoyment. For this section, I decided to make a map tier list and kind of explain the tiers a little bit, while describing the way I feel about why some maps are in that tier. I won't do it for every map, but hopefully you get the idea. Feel free to pause if you want to see the entire tier list. Let's just get the rock bottom tier out the way first, which I describe as the instant back out or the requeue tier. There is no circumstance in which I will ever play on these maps. Bungie could tell me there are straight noobs in the lobby and I still would not play it. If I'm flying in orbit to a Crucible match and I see the name of any of these maps pop up, I am out of there. Disjunction should really be in a tier of its own now that I'm thinking about it, because whenever I see the name of Disjunction, there are players already leaving to the character select screen and they're beating me to it. Seriously, I would just pull up the roster and 4 or 5 players are already gone the moment they see Disjunction. So yeah, I don't even want my Guardian landing on that abomination of a map. It's that cursed. It's that bad. There are 8 maps in that tier, and there are roughly 30 in total, maybe 29, but I think it's 30. So, with that being said, that's almost a third of the maps that are instant backouts, just to put into perspective why many players quit a lot, including myself. The tier above isn't that much better. If I sense the idea that I'm going to get hard balanced, I'm not even going to waste my time trying to play it out because I could create all the space in the world and it would not occur to my teammates to at least walk out of the spawn and contest heavy in some way, shape, or form. Biggest offenders to this are Bannerfall and Cauldron. If your team does not have any kind of mid-map control, you are just going to get farmed by heavy ammo the entire time, and getting farmed by heavy feels bad, so I leave. And then the tier above that are the maps where I prefer not to play them multiple times in succession, but if I haven't played that map in a while, and I suddenly get it, I don't really mind playing it every now and then. And Multiplex is a solid example of that. I would prefer to play the maps I like, but if I do get this map, I don't really mind it. I just don't want to play it multiple times in a row. And then we move on to the maps that I'm generally accepting of. If I fly in and see the names of any of the maps listed, my mood goes up. We've got Eventide, which I really enjoy. Can't really go wrong with Midtown. And we've got Distant Shore, aka Shores of Time from Destiny 1, which is a certified hood classic. And then at the very top, we got the maps that I could play for hours on end and still be engaged. Jav 4 and Endless Vale are beta maps from early Destiny 2, and they still stand the test of time. Kinda goes to show that the Year 1 map developers were kinda cooking. And then we also have Burnout, which is another hood banger. If I see these maps, I will not leave no matter how bad I get team balanced, or even if there's a sweaty pre-made fire team opposing me. I love the maps that much. And you want to know the one thing that's common amongst the maps I like playing? The heavy brick spawn locations is in a neutral position and does not favor one spawn over the other. Both teams have an equal opportunity to contest for heavy, with solid angles that feel good to engage from. So of the 30 maps in the rotation, there are only 12 I like playing. That's not even half of the rotation. I can't speak for everyone, but when most of the maps in the rotation are bad, is it any wonder that players are quitting? Think about it. The sandbox is very bad, so the quality of the gameplay experience is unenjoyable, on maps that are for the most part unenjoyable, with team balancing that is unenjoyable. I understand that they've addressed some of what I mentioned, but when they implement harsher quitter penalties, people are just going to AFK the match if the lobby sucks, or disengage with the Crucible entirely. If you are heavily team balanced, it's almost better to just throw the match and get mercied so the game is over with faster. Everyone wins because I get to move on to a new match, and the teammates that serve as counterweight to sandbag me don't have to suffer for too long. If I try and prevent the mercy, all it's really going to do is prolong the suffering of my blueberries in their fictitious cage. I know I rambled a lot about maps and team balancing, but I hope it was enough to offer some perspective. I want to briefly touch on the skill expression or lack thereof, and I would go as far to say that this problem rests on the shoulders of both the players and the devs. The idea of what makes someone or something skillful has taken many forms over the years. You've got the hand cannon shoddy loyalists that believe that this playstyle is the only skillful one. You got build crafting enthusiasts that think that, that think the same way, and they think using weapons is cringe. And you've got many other subsets of players in their playstyles, but those are some of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. I want to mention now that there are no angels in this debacle, and I won't even put myself above this because I do and likely will continue to name call players if I die in ways that annoy me and with playstyles that I find cringe and unenjoyable. What really bothers me now is the whole prismatic hunter, clones, smokes, and swarm nades. It's very unenjoyable to play against, and I call those players cringe all the time. Same with the hand cannon players that are experts at fucking the wall and never wide swing at an angle. It's the correct way to play, but man, is it so unengaging to play against. It's so unfun to engage with. Hell, there's probably something in this gameplay that you might be watching that you might not respect or consider cringe. I know I'm not above this, but I will say I've at least made an excellent effort to at least use something different, and above all, keep the banter in the context of the game to myself or my stream. The problem is that people will take it too far and go around whispering nasty things or harassing a player, and this behavior just pushes folks away. There is a considerable portion of players who stopped playing and stated that the D2 community is what killed their enjoyment of the game, not the game itself. Talking to nasty people does no one any favors unless it's me, because I would just make haters look like clowns and farm content off of them. On another topic of skill expression, I want to briefly touch on the skill gap and how it feels non-existent to me. There have been periods of time where the better player generally came out on top, with the highest skill period being vanilla Destiny 2, in my opinion. Over the years, Bungie literally nerfed high skill players while giving low skill or average skill players tools to compete with high skill players who put in the time to get to their skill level. Maybe it's the skill creep kicking in heavy because the player population is low, but it bothers me that there is essentially so much no skill, brainless garbage in the game that somehow 1.2 KD players are giving me a difficult time. It's crazy to think that there really is no difference between a player like myself and then your average bum tower blueberry. The talentless became talented. It's like young Rock Lee in Naruto having his insane glow up and going beast mode, minus the part where, he worked hard, and instead it was just given to him by reading some scroll. That's genuinely what this feels like. Another thing contributing to this is the fact that Bungie does not properly adjust the game for the skill increase of a player base over the years, so the people that were good hit a ceiling a long time ago, and since the game doesn't change, it gives ample periods of time for a player to improve, and there are more resources for that than there ever was to do that in terms of skill acquisition. Maybe that's why Crucible feels unrewarding to most people who invest time into it. Firstly, you gotta acquire a decent understanding of the game so it expands your tool belt on things you can use, and if you do that, you will gradually get better. And if you do that, you will pay more attention to the things that annoy you about the game, and it starts to expose more of the flaws of the game. And then you will get more jaded at the matchmaking algorithms because you're getting better, and it's just a chain reaction of things you don't want to happen to you as a player. This is the paradox of the journey of improving as a player. The game gets worse, not better. Another paradox that kind of ties this all together is the fact that Bungie does bare minimum to support PvP because they do not believe it deserves resources. Confusing to you because it confuses me. If you put out a product on an open marketplace and it's not giving you the results you desire, you iterate upon it based on feedback and improve it so that it brings value to more people. And if it brings value to more people will give you money or buy your product. It's not an easy process and requires trial and error and a lot of brainstorming and time. But if you don't give it an honest to God try, you will never really know what it could have been. I feel like Checkmate was the last honest to God try for Bungie to shake up the PvP space since its 30th anniversary update. Instead of sticking to the idea and iterating accordingly, it was scrapped completely, and now we are essentially back to the Forsaken formula of Destiny, which I thought they wanted to avoid. They once again had to conform to the will of the community, even if it's an objectively bad change. It's why I'm hopeful for Marathon, because Bungie is capable of making a great first-person shooting experience when allowed the privilege of doing so. I know many of you heard that and might think to dismiss Marathon because of their history of incompetence with the Destiny series, which I think is totally fair. But think about those great times you had when PvP was great, and it left you craving more after each play session. Whether you be at school or at work, it was all you thought about doing when you were there. Bungie can manifest greatness if they are allowed to. That is just not possible with Destiny 2, because it's split between PvE and PvP, and the latter gets all the love. And not only that, there's this status quo and power that Destiny 1 players just have over Bungie to a point where they can't really exercise their vision for PvP. Marathon will provide that clean slate in the much needed reset that Destiny never got. Sure, it may not be the favorable genre people wanted. I like extraction shooters personally, but I know others don't. But beggars can't really be choosers in this situation. So, I don't know, I'll just take what I can get. Bungie promised us a fully supported PvP shooter with a great anti-cheat and dedicated servers off the rip, and that signature gunplay sauce Bungie is so well known for. And that's why I'm patiently waiting for Marathon and expecting it. Even if the possibility of a Destiny 3 were to exist, the same PvP problems would still be around because players want to play Destiny 1 in a different game. It's the same curse that's fucked Destiny 2 PvP. History will really just repeat itself, and I can't really say I'll be along for the ride in the case of that happening, but it's very unlikely that Destiny 3 will ever come to fruition, so I'm not really stressing about it. The PvP player base has brain rot, and that shit can stay in Destiny. I just want to play a Bungie shooter that the developers want to make, not what the community of players think they want to play. That last sentence alone pretty much just encompassed my entire thought processes on the oxymoron that is the Crucible. If y'all made it to the end, I appreciate you listening to me once again, and as usual, feel free to ask questions or post your thoughts and I will interact with them as soon as I can. This did take me a while to make, so if you are watching, please consider subbing or at least giving this video a like. I never asked this of folks watching, but it really did take me several days to make this. Plus, I'm coming off of I guess a minor cold, so my voice is a bit raspy, and I had to take breaks, so I'm sorry about that. Needless to say, though, be easy, folks. I'll see y'all around, either in stream or in the next video, whenever that will be. Which I don't really know, but yeah. See you later.